Okay, let's get this meeting started. Roll call, please.
Mason, Carpusella,
Here.
Lorson,
Here.
Barban,
Here.
Mason.
Okay, we'll start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. Don't worry about moving my chair. Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, citizens' time. There's nobody in the audience. Do we have any emails?
No.
Okay, then we'll go for a minute approval. Is there any amendments you want to put to the minutes? Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, minutes passed. I'll sign those.
Where are the minutes from March?
That was when we were having the IT stuff, yeah.
Oh, okay.
I was a little behind because I lost half of February last time. We had some server issues, so February is complete.
Okay, so March.
You got a mic on you? Please talk into the mic so people can hear you.
Yes.
Yes, we had server issues last time and lost some of the minutes, so this is all of February's, but I'll have March next time.
Okay, agenda item, discussion of the ARB guidelines.
Yes, good evening, board. So we have a mixed group tonight in terms of those who have seen the guidelines most recently. We have one that has had a very thorough review of this over the past year, one who's been on the board before previously and now is seeing the guidelines again, and one who is new on the board. So I'll give a brief rehashing of general guidelines and the goals of updating these. These guidelines have not been updated since about 2010 because of how different or how rapid Haymarket's growth has been and how much has changed over time. The guidelines are in need of overhaul. The goal of this is to provide something that is in congruence with the comprehensive plan and the current zoning ordinance and historic district overlay that also streamlines the process of ARB review and approval, administrative review and approval, and all other means that we go through when exterior modifications are applied for. So a lot of what I've provided edit-wise in the past has been related to what is administrative review and approval, what is ARB review and approval, how can we best update some of the minor details about different types of materials or designs used. A lot of discussion outside and in these meetings has been about formatting, which I'm continuing to work on when it comes to annotations, references. The goal is to hyperlink a lot of this back to the zoning ordinance and comprehensive plan, so this is as small of a package as possible and that there's clear references to everything. Something I did want to mention that I don't believe I've brought up with the board before was it may be helpful as well as we go through your feedback tonight, but also continue to work on this document. I don't believe I've put a reference to section 58-16.8, which is in the historic district overlay section of the ordinance. This is matters to be considered by the board. So every staff report I've given the board, there's those zoning ordinance references that list out as an example. The board will consider the following in passing: general design arrangement, texture, material, and color, those kinds of things. I don't think we've ever brought it up in relation to the guidelines in this section of the ordinance. This is something else I wanted to bring up that we can maybe discuss as we go through these. And how best to, if we just either reference it or maybe have direct quotes to it in here as well. Like I said, I don't want to make the document too bulky, but that's another thing we can talk about adding or referencing. So I'm open to your feedback now, can help answer any questions and work with formatting. Happy to start with Ben as well. I know we talked a lot about formatting. Happy to start that conversation again.
Yeah, I mean, I think historically, I mean, you've done a good job. I think historically, what I've kind of taken my charge is, I think we've had some folks have in the past have difficulty navigating through the guidelines, whether it's residents within the town, developers, architects, things like that. And so I think ideally we'd like to try to make it a little bit more concise, Again, I still see, repetitive language. I think you've done a better job of clarifying what's intended to be administrative review, what's board. I think there's still some, you know, ambiguity there. This is always has been a narrative, and I think maybe even if like, yeah, I don't like a flow chart, right? Like it kind of helps, that visual reference. Um, I mean, I have a lot of questions and comments in the margin. I don't know if it's worth it to go through line by line now, or if, you and I can kind of sit down and chat.
This, for you as well, Mr.
Yeah.
Capicella, since you're new to this as well, I'm happy to meet with you separately as well if you have very specific feedback, especially given how thorough it can be. Ben and I have met outside of board meetings before to go in depth on these. Just as an update for you, Ben, too, I am working on site plan review and approval flow charts right now.
Yeah.
I can add that ARB guideline to it right now as well, to that list.
And I, and the one takeaway from this original guideline too, it seemed like prior board members were kind of tasked with certain sections, and so you have all these different
No
voices.
standard language. in
Yeah,
there.
and
Oh,
there's not a unifying, and so I think it's helpful to provide Thomas the feedback, and we kind of craft it to make it more unifying.
I agree with that 100%.
Okay, so I guess we'll take this offline, and we can address it. Any additions, like section additions that anybody wants to just mention? Because like one thing, I know solar panels are coming into town and people are a little bit confused about solar panels.
Mhm.
Do you think there's like a section we should put out, since we've kind of blocked it out for like fencing and walls and like material? Do we feel it's prominent enough to bring out as its own kind of like the telecommunications and dish?
Yeah,
Section.
I think more of like placement on the homes, right? Because I think the design is pretty standardized. But then again, like you kind of get into, oh, you don't want it observed from the right of way or public view, right? But then that might be the best place where
Angles, yeah.
angle where someone gets the most sun
Yeah.
to kind of maximize it.
And you also start to interfere with Virginia laws that are in
Mhm.
place. So, that's when Thomas needs to really be abreast of what the Virginia laws are, so that he can instruct us on what comments we can make and what we can't.
Mhm.
Definitely. One comment I wanted to make on solar too. There are some stipulations in the zoning ordinance about solar. I can look into that more. I can send it over to you. And then we can discuss how much language we want to put in the guidelines about it versus referencing to those
Yeah.
particular sections in the ordinance.
Well, in the guidelines, we are pretty much handcuffed on what we can do because of those Virginia laws. And I think that would be a good thing to mention in here is, hey, if you follow the Virginia laws, you probably won't have any problems with it, or, give them some guidance and reference points for them to look at if they're confused on what to really apply for.
Could we reference it? And I'm just throwing ideas out there. We're talking about ease of use and helping guide people through the process. Actually put a clickable link within there as well, so they can actually just go right to the guideline from the
Mhm.
from the
Yes.
state. And if there's a federal guideline, go to that one as well.
Absolutely. The goal of this as well is all these documents are currently available on the Town of Haymarket website.
Mhm.
And so once there, we want to make sure all hyperlinks are usable so that this can be easily navigated.
Because I did check that with article.
Are there still a couple of
was
links that are
16,
still
because I
not
was like,
there?
oh, is this in the guidelines? And then I realized it was a link and clicked on it. I'm like, oh, good. This is
Mhm.
what we were going for.
The link, that one does work then?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, because to try to avoid like repetitive language, and then if you update it here, then get updated there.
Yeah, and I guess also in the administrative section, like we were discussing earlier, I guess I'll reveal it, but there are certain things that are subject to be opinionated on what should be included, what could be excluded. So that's why I'd like to reveal it for the board to think about is, when it comes to ground covering architectural structures like patios, do we really want to address that at the ARB level, or do we consider it, since it would be
At grade.
ground level and away from the streetscape, that it shouldn't be, but definitely closet on stuff, if it's in a public space, for instance, we did require, what do we consider Jerry Kennedy's property? Is that Red Root? That's not where Hidden Jewels is.
We'll just call it the Hidden
That
Jewels for this
patio, we
conversation.
required that to come by us because it integrated the wall into it and everything else, and it was a public space. So, certain things we would like to try and keep when it comes to businesses. So,
Yeah, I think, I mean, that was kind of our intent initially, like things that were in public view, right on like certain thoroughfares. And then, to provide enough guidance for them that town staff could review. And I think too, provide guidance to the person submitting the application, right? So they don't just submit something and then town's like, no, right? Because ultimately you want somebody to be able to like go through this process and hopefully do it right the first time.
Yeah.
That ties into a bit of what I was talking about earlier, just it's a bit of a pivot, but back to section 58, 16.8 matters to be considered by the board. I think in the past, we've had applicants provide me something that, yes, it does meet the zoning ordinance, and yes, it does meet the guidelines, but there's still purview by the board to consider what's in the surroundings, and they've had to come back and change that. Is that a communication thing between staff and the applicant that could be streamlined? Yes, as well, but maybe there's room to also reference, here's the discretion the board has despite what these specific guidelines are.
And I think even to that point, because I know in here we talk about the fence applications being administratively reviewed and approved, and then item 2 in there we talk about materials, right? And it says colors and choice of materials for fences and walls shall be complement and consistent with the design and materials of the parent building, right? That's a subjective sentence.
circular,
Yeah,
right?
So I think
If
there's
times change too and the vinyl color's different, suddenly that subjective opinion, that Overton window shifts a little bit.
right. And I totally envision this being like a back and forth and trying to I think ultimately it's like if there's things that we think that don't necessarily need to come before us, then you guys can do that, but give you enough guidance and direction to be able to do that.
Do we want to put something in here? It's kind of based on what I was talking about, just as somebody who's just done work on his home that went through the process within the HOA, but I didn't know I needed to come through the town as well. Do we want to put some kind of language in there regarding that as well?
Yeah, and you started to put that language in there, but it's not consistent at certain locations, and so that was one of my comments. And I think normally with any sort of code, right, you look at who's the most stringent, right? Typically go to the local or HOA, right, and then you go state, and then you go federal. And so I think alerting some folks to hey, you need to get this reviewed by your HOA.
In particular too, there was, I think as part of the guidelines as well, there's some stipulations that are specific to HOAs based on bylaws when they were first created,
Yep.
that kind of thing. So definitely keep in mind, and I'll make sure to clean those particular references up as well.
Yeah, because I know Longstreet we're exempt with the fencing, and we have very specific criteria for the fencing.
Mhm.
Do we know if other HOAs have as strict requirements? Because then it's like who trumps?
That could be
Sherwood
something.
Forest does.
Okay.
That could be something we gather more. We've been updating our communications plan at the staff and council level. So maybe now that we have more HOA contacts, especially for the newer associations, that'd be good information to include as well, if we can get that.
Yeah, is there a standard for fencing between the HOAs? Because I think there's different standards.
There's different
Yeah.
standards. Sherwood Forest is pretty strict on what they allow, and
Green Hill Crossing only allows picket fence, period, end of story.
Okay.
I know somebody in Green Hill,
No metal fences? Yeah, see.
I know
metal
somebody in
fences are
Green Hill that
pretty
tried to
much-
put a stockade up between their lot and Haymarket Station and was denied.
Which is funny because that's pretty much what's back there. That's the original fence from the builder, right? I'm thinking,
No.
Haymarket Station, that's Councilmember Passanel's area, right? Yeah, because I think all those were not picket fences, but stockade fences.
I can tell you there's a barbed wire fence that was in my backyard from Haymarket Station that I put my picket fence up incorrectly because my guys putting the fence up didn't want to get stuck by the rusty barbed wire.
So then maybe it's like a caveat saying like, you know, HOA requirements may be more stringent than town requirements.
Mhm.
It could, in that case, would it be best, keep it general? Please contact your HOA for any further specific guidance on those things.
Or do we, you mentioned flow chart earlier. Do you flow chart it almost like with a timeline? HOA, town, county,
Yeah.
you know, kind of flow chart it that way.
I can definitely add that to the flow chart. Let me,
Just thinking
Put it
like
on
a
my note.
timeline of how you do things.
Yeah. Because I think there was some timeline in terms of narrative where it was like 10-day process, 45 days, and kind of like going through. I think having that shown graphically can also help, because I think as I was adding it up, I didn't know if some things were going concurrently or sequentially, and then I'm like, oh, well, this is like a 4 or 6 month process.
I think with that too, it could be helpful, just thinking about it. How many flow charts would the board want? It could be a general zoning procedure. It could be a demolition application, architecturals related to a site plan, those kinds of things. How many flow charts would you want? Because as an example, we have
You can
to,
branch it.
That's what I'm thinking. You can
Okay.
branch it. You
Keep
can have
it
one flow
branched.
chart that kind of branches out. A flow chart of a timeline, but this is, yeah, branch it out.
okay. One other item I was thinking of, if there aren't any other comments right now by the board. Currently, the historic district overlay covers the entire corporate limits of the town. That being said, there's obviously some corridors that are more prominent than others. Do you have any comments on how best to balance out preserving the historic district per the ordinance, but also ensuring that there's focus on maintaining some sort of scale with these corridors? Corridors I'm thinking of in particular, to put it out there, would be like Washington Street, Jefferson Street, Fayette Street, Madison Street.
Yeah.
A lot of the old, more historic parts of the town that aren't part of HOA subdivisions, and those that are most publicly used.
A quick point of order on that, though. That's an ordinance put together by council, right?
Mhm.
I mean, they say we're in a historic overlaid town, and here's our overlay. So they're the ones who delegate what the true overlay is. All we can do is give feedback to it. So are you looking at changing that ordinance now, and you're looking for feedback, or?
It's a possibility. All options are considered now. I guess more is, say it isn't changed, would the board have, in your minds, have any power over focusing on certain corridors within the overlay?
Yeah, well, I mean, that ordinance is what forms us as a body. So we're really the executors of the ordinance, right? So do we have the power to change that? Well, we can influence it, but I don't think we have the power to change it. That's actually something that happens through council and the ordinance changes. So, are you looking for feedback for that now, or?
We can include that within this as well.
Just a simple if and statement. If within the town limits and not part of an HOA,
Yeah, follow
town guidelines.
town guidelines for the historic overlay if you
Mhm.
fall in it.
That's what, yeah, if within historic overlay and not part of an HOA.
Thomas, didn't you had proposed a modified map to take out some of the HOAs, right?
That is still kind of being discussed at planning commission level.
Okay.
So it turns into also, if it's not concurrently passed by planning commission and then town council, it's hard to line that up with these guidelines as well.
Right,
So,
right. Because I think we had pushed it on to planning commission, right?
mhm.
Okay.
Pre-me planning commission, correct?
Yes, that's
Okay.
something I can follow. That's something I
might
can
need to
follow
write
up with
in
the
on that. How
current
about that?
commission on.
Oh,
Yes.
this kind of stuff has been kicked down the road for years. I
Okay.
mean, the whole time that I was in there, we could never come up with a full change on any of the guidelines or ordinances or anything. So historically, because we're so small and we're all volunteers and we're not fully trained in this profession, right? we do our best guess and it has been kicked down for a long time. So now that we got a planner here who can fully focus on it, we're trying to
Yeah.
narrow this and nail it down to where we get periodic reviews and get progression.
One other update too, I was thinking of, I'm still working on making the list of historic structures in the town. So the zoning ordinance, anything built before 1950, that's the definition of historic in the town. With that in mind, though, there's already listed contributing resources in the comprehensive plan. I can designate that within a list. I've provided, I believe in this, if not this, there's some draft maps of historic buildings inventory. Just as an example, this is packet pages 38 and 39.
Should we have one, just one single source of truth that everything points to? Instead of documenting it out and making sure that everything's worded the same exact way? Because the planning commission is going to have stuff, ARB is going to have stuff that all point to the same stuff. Does it make sense to have one single source of truth and just the documentation for each side point to that single source of truth instead of writing up their own wording on it?
I think in the current guidelines, as well as some of the revisions, that's pointed to the comprehensive plan currently. So I can keep the references in there, and as we work on updating it, as we discussed in planning commission previously,
I just
I
look
think,
at,
that's the parent document we're gonna be basing a lot of this off of with zoning ordinance.
yeah, just look at like purpose of the
Being the rules
architecture
behind
of the
it.
ARB is all buildings within a historic overlay district were built prior to 1950. The final sentence there, boom, historical buildings are designated in comprehensive plan, sections such and such, subset such and such, boom, done. We don't have to call it out here. We call it out in one single spot. So you only have to update it in one place.
That's something I could streamline.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm all about streamline.
and that's what we try to do by referencing and putting a linkage in here.
Yep.
To the documents. Any other comments? Okay, so we'll move forward. I'm assuming Ben, you will be meeting up with
Yep. Thomas?
Thomas and go over stuff. Okay. Okay, where are we at here? Okay, old business.
Main old business I have is I'm still working with the applicant for the Lane Motors property. That COA for demolition was approved by the ARB in the past. I've listed out explicitly the conditions that were given in that approval. There's still a timeline. I'm still waiting on a site plan submission. Other exterior architecturals that they've hinted towards before. Still waiting on submissions for those before they're brought to planning commission or the board. And with that in mind, I'm not issuing the COA for demolition officially until that's more solidified by them on their end.
Do we know if they've even closed on the property yet?
I don't. I can follow up with them on that. As they've discussed before, it's been an ongoing journey to get the title for that property. So that's something I can follow up with them on. In the same light as well, with the other projects, Magnolia Crossing, which is the 11 townhomes off of Black Drive, they're still going through Prince William County Building Department for approvals for that. Once we start preparing for breaking ground, submission of bonds, those kinds of things, I'll update the board on that. But currently, it's still going through Building Department.
Yeah, and the projected owner of the Lane property is doing that development. So I'm assuming that a lot of this will be in parallel,
Intertwined, yeah.
just because they'll have the heavy equipment in town at that time. It'll be easier for them to do things.
Those are the main pieces of old business I have.
Okay. Any questions? Okay, we'll move on to new business. Anything?
Main new business is, this is a very quick turnover between last meeting and this meeting. Still working on getting sign applications prepared, other outstanding applications from business owners onto the agenda. So we'll have an extended time for that. Offers open as well. I know we talked about Ben and I working directly with each other for guidelines updates. I'm happy to email all of you updates at once, as well as meet with you individually
Okay.
to discuss that further.
This might be part of old business, but Have we closed out the COA with the demolition of the park building? Has that all been finalized?
Yes, so to give an update on that as well, we received all outside agency termination letters that we needed for the demolition permit for the park house. That has been taken care of, the demolition, and then we're waiting to close that hopefully this week.
Okay, and to follow on with that, with the new business piece of it, as we go forward with design and stuff, remember, keep the ARB up
No,
abreast of
absolutely.
it.
We're still working on timelines for that pavilion design that we'll bring to the board and then eventually to council as well.
Has anything been salvaged from the park building?
Yes, so the stones from the chimney and fireplace and I believe a few other sections of the house have been preserved.
Okay.
I think we're keeping them in the garage. I don't know if that's the
Presently,
best
I think
description of the
so,
building,
yeah.
but that's where we're keeping them right now. So
Okay.
those items were what was preserved from the building and Phil's been taken care of.
Yep, the maintenance manager is working with the police department on securing that so that there's no vandalism, theft, or anything else.
Okay.
A similar note too, I guess for new business, we're close to finalizing, doing a punch list walk for the town park sidewalk. Just thinking about Washington Street visibility, lights will have been installed, a couple other right of way installations are taking place, and then we'll do that walk and complete that part of the sidewalk project.
Okay, any other questions for new business? Cool. Okay, moving on, planning commission updates.
Hadn't had 2 meetings for the past 2 months, so we were required by guidelines to have a meeting last night, of which we started working on updating the comprehensive plan. So we literally went through that section by section by section last night. First round of updates on that, and we hope to start getting that thing put together really well. Bylaws as well, excuse me, yeah.
Okay. Any questions for the planning commission liaison? Okay, we'll move on to town council updates. Primary focus is our budget. We have 2 SUPs that were on the agenda. One of them was pulled back by request of the applicant. The other SUP, it was approved conditionally, so more focus for planning commission. Be expecting site plans to be coming your way for updates for that SUP.
Which SUP is that?
Chick-fil-A,
Okay.
extended drive-through. So the site plans will be coming your way, and there was like I said, it was a conditional SUP that, it needs to go through the process, be vetted, be fully approved by the internal and external folks. So that means fire marshal and anything else, because complications in the past have been access with what they've planned to do with the parking lot between the bank and Chick-fil-A. And that's all documented within the town meeting minutes. So if you need any details, you can go there for it. Those were about the 2 primary focus items that happened in that meeting. Right. Any questions? Okay, then we'll move on. Next item, do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
I second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.